everybody, and welcome to Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Before we get started today, I just want to remind you that you can support Attendance Bias in several ways. You can visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can afford to keep the podcast going. You can also leave a rating and a review of the show wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow Attendance Bias on social media. Now, on with today's show. I received a message on Instagram a few weeks ago from today's guest, Pat Quinn. It was a thoughtful and complimentary fan message. He was telling me how he enjoys Attendance Bias and how our histories as Phish fans seem to interact in a number of ways. I love receiving fan mail, and so I clicked on this person's profile to see who he was beyond his profile picture. What I found was an artist who works in one of the most interesting mediums. Pat is a metal forger who helps run and teach newcomers how to forge and shape metal. I was immediately intrigued. When I think of forging metal and blacksmiths, I picture what is probably the most generic image: a medieval peasant covered in cloaks with soot all over his face, hammering a piece of metal over an anvil with sparks flying everywhere. While some things never change and there's some truth to that image, Pat's organization, the Center for Metal Arts in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, is bringing something old to a new millennium. He and his colleagues host workshops where people come to learn the ancient art that results in beautiful heirloom-quality tools. It has to be seen to believe, really, and there's a link to the CMA in today's show notes. Then, of course, there's Pat's selection for today's episode. Pat chose to talk about Phish's performance of Most Events Aren't Planned, which closed Set 1 on July 24th, 2024 at the Mohegan Sun Arena in Connecticut. The Vida Blue original is typical for a Page McConnell song. It's mid-tempo, it contains thoughtful lyrics about change and loss, and it also has a few time signature changes that whip up both the crowd and the band into a frenzy. This version at Mohegan Sun is a stellar performance. So I didn't know what to expect diving into today's conversation, but we finished excited and satisfied. Let's join Pat to talk about Hartford, to talk about metalwork, and sandwich cookies, as we revisit Most Events Aren't Planned from July 24th, 2024 at Mohegan Sun. Patrick, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for reaching out to me. I have to tell you, when you reached out to me and I saw your Instagram handle, I was wondering who was on the other side of this name, because your Instagram handle is for the education center, I guess, called the Center for Metal Arts, in which you teach and also practice forging metal. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We're a not-for-profit school located in a National Historic Landmark in Western Pennsylvania, and we teach forging workshops all throughout the year, from beginner through advanced topics and timeframes.
I find that so cool, because when I think about it and when I looked at some of the images and videos that were posted on that Instagram feed, it seems like something straight out of medieval arts, but I guess it was present at that time, but it's still going, and it seems kind of like a niche service. So I'm wondering, how did you get into metal forging?
Yeah, you're right. In fact, it's experiencing quite a resurgence right now, actually. But, my background, I had a BFA in sculpture from Alfred University, and that's where I got introduced to metal fabrication and creative metalwork. And after graduating from there, I took a job at a production blacksmith shop making lighting fixtures, lamps, and chandeliers and stuff like that. And that was really my introduction to the physical act of forging. And from there, it was, that's all I wanted to do. So I pursued a degree in it even further, got an MFA in forging, and then just started this school here, and it's been going really well.
So what does the school provide? I mean, it sounds like an obvious question or an obvious answer. What does the school provide? But you said it's becoming more popular. There's a resurgence. If the CMA, the Center for Metal Arts, is a place where people can go to learn how to forge metal and create art out of metal, what does the roster for a metal forging school look like? Because I'm a middle school teacher, and all you have to do is go to like a local Five Below or or when I was growing up, a hot topic to see what 13-year-olds look like. You can guess what my class looks like
Yeah.
roster wise.
Yeah.
Who goes to learn about metal forging in 2025?
Yeah, mostly we do sort of like adult education, and a lot of our students are entrepreneurs who want to start their own business or already maybe have a metalworking business that want to add forging as a component to what they already create, whether that's like, fireplace work or railings or gates, or some people even just have it as a hobby, this like whole community of making things yourself and being in touch with traditional crafts is really popular right now, especially in a society that's trending so technologic. People really want to, learn to make things with their hands and make things that last forever, sort of heirloom quality crafted objects and tools. And so, we get a broad range of people who are already professionals and people who just want to try it for fun on the weekend.
Is that what you get into? Is that what you're most interested in terms of becoming an artist, like creating something that you can express or that lasts forever, when forever in quotes, because my nihilistic side says nothing lasts forever, but
Right.
as far as close to forever as possible when it comes to
Yeah.
art, is that what draws you in?
Well, what drew me in originally was the sculptural possibilities of it. I mean, forging iron is almost a one-to-one translation of as working clay. So you can use it really as a vehicle for sculpture and be very expressive with it. But I have been very interested in the tool making portion of it and making tools that are of a certain quality that last a very long time. And so I have both of those outlets that are, consume my everyday because, myself and my small staff, we make all the tools for the classroom for the students to use. What satisfies my soul the most is being creative with the craft and making sculpture. So I teach both of those as well, both functional classes and creative classes. And we just try to cover anything that anybody might be interested in when they get exposed to forging.
And so where is the CMA, the Center for Metal Arts?
It's in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is about 60 miles east of Pittsburgh. And we're located in a very, very special National Historic Landmark site of the Cambria Iron Company, later Bethlehem Steel, and we're using and restoring an industrial blacksmith shop that was built in the 1860s and ran continuously until 1992 to just service the Johnstown steel industry.
And for anyone listening, I'll put links in the show notes today, including social media handles, as well as websites. So anyone listening who wants to test it out or is just plain interested, I didn't know that I was, but like I said, when I was flipping through your feed, it was like, this looks so cool. It's something that I could never do. I could barely change a tire.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And do you have, to wrap this portion up, do you have any piece that you're particularly proud of? And if so, why?
Honestly, I'm proud of them all, but I'm most interested in what I'm working on currently. And so right now I'm forging a quarter scale sculptural maquette that's going to be a collaborative sculpture class in 2026 on all the big industrial forging hammers. And so I'm pretty well all consumed with making that work at the moment.
Well, we skipped over the whole part, or I skipped over the whole part in the beginning of our introduction of why you're here for Phish. I was so excited to talk to you about metal, literal metal, that we skipped over the whole main point of this podcast episode. So Patrick is here today to talk about the version of Most Events Aren't Planned, which closed the first set on July 24th, 2024 at Mohegan Sun Arena in Connecticut. It sounds like it was really recent. To me, it feels like a really long time ago at this point, the point that we're recording. But let's get into who you are as a Phish fan, not just as an artist, with the attendance bias lightning round.
Attendance bias lightning round.
Patrick, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember most from it?
My first show was on 11/26/97, and that was at the Hartford Civic Center. I was, I think, a freshman in high school, I remember vividly getting there and getting to my seat, sort of walking around the exterior of the Hartford Civic Center, and then didn't quite get to my seat, in time to see the lights go down. So that was still kind of a foreign thing for me, but they opened that show with Tweezer. It's kind of like burned into my brain, sort of, how funky Mike's bass sounded. And that version is like, it's not sort of the gold standard for me, but I just love that, that 97 sound. And I love when Mike's turned up in the mix. And then I really, another thing that stuck out for me a lot was the lights during 2001. It really felt like there was a spaceship inside the Hartford Civic Center, and, being that age and so new to that. And it was just incredible. I was hooked.
Off mic, before we hit record today, we were talking a little bit about our backgrounds, and you said that you're from Hartford, you're from the Northeast.
Yeah.
I've probably seen, if I look up my lists of shows I've seen by city or at least by state, probably New York. New Jersey is probably second. And then I would guess Connecticut is third. And most of them are in Hartford.
Right.
I have to ask you, so many high quality shows in 1.0, but also 3.0. I don't know what 4.0 means anymore. I'm kind of one of those old fashioned fans. I'll leave that to the kids. What do you think it is about Hartford that brings the best out of the band? Because the shows I'm thinking of, the one you just mentioned, your first, although I wasn't there, November 26th, 97. I saw a show December 12th, 99, at the Hartford Civic Center, which started off kind of bland, in my opinion, in the first set. But the second set has this ridiculous all-time drowned that lasts something like 30 minutes, and I'm still listening to it and discovering new things, like the best movie you've ever seen. Every time you watch it, you hear something new, and that's what that version. So there's that. When they came back August 14th, 2009, I think it was, this was not at the Civic Center. This was at the time called the Comcast Center. What is it? The Meadows?
The Meadows. Yeah.
And they just kind of brought back Gamehenge.
Right.
Because they hadn't really played a lot of Gamehenge since they came back in 2009. What do you think it is about Hartford that just brings it from the band?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like, initially I go to this and I can't be for certain if this is the exact way it went, but I feel like I heard an interview from Trey where he said something about, going to a Dead show in the 80s in Hartford. I think it was 83 or something. And I don't know if he took mushrooms or something, and he's like, I got it. That was the moment I got it. And I always felt like maybe that moment was so special that it sort of maybe subconsciously made them bring it every time they came to Hartford. But also, Vermont doesn't really have any big venues and stuff. And when they were sort of like getting bigger and outgrew like Nectar's and all those places in Burlington, there weren't that many places in New England to play. And so Hartford, I feel like, just like people consider SPAC sort of like a hometown venue, even though it's not even in New England, I always considered Hartford a hometown venue, even though it's not even in Vermont. So,
well, moving forward quite a bit from 97 or even from 2009, what was your most recent Phish show and what did you think of it?
My most recent Phish show was Saratoga Performing Arts Center, the Twee Prize Fest. I didn't write down the date here, so it's sort of escaping me or whatever, but I went to 2 shows of that run over the summer. I don't think it comes as any surprise that I was totally blown away, and I found it to be incredibly well played. It had, the gag factor, the surprises, everything I really like about a Phish concert that, maybe isn't as common nowadays. And I just love it when the band is having fun. And that is a prime example of a show where they were having fun. And I think it really shined through in the music.
That show is up there. I gotta tell you, I think 3 or 4 people in a row that I've had on this podcast, when I ask that question, what's the most recent show? What did you think? That one has come up in like 4 consecutive episodes. So those of you who are regular listeners, just keep it in mind that you're probably going to hear a lot more about the Saratoga, especially the Tweed Prize show, the Sunday night show. There was something about it that it was a key that turned a lock in a lot of Phish fans' brains.
Right. Yeah, it was special. I've learned over the years, and especially as I've, grown up a little bit, to kind of let go of expectations and just be in the moment. And I am like, I'm a pretty critical fan for sure. I'm a huge 1.0 person, but I'm really happy with how they're playing now and everything. But I don't really go, with expectations that are out of control or unrealistic or whatever. But that show really sort of snapped me back and was like, oh, they still got it. They can still do it. This is a pretty special thing. So.
Absolutely. I felt the same way. Since you're a metal forger, and would you describe yourself as a teacher as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
So what would you describe as the most metal Phish song?
I got 3 options that I came up with: Carini, Axilla, or Big Black Furry Creature from Mars were the 3 that I thought of. And, at first it was Carini and Axilla, but then I was like, oh yeah, big Black Furry Creature from Mars. And I feel like that's the one,
That'll do it. Yeah. Of your 3 answers, which I think I would describe absolutely as yes, and yes. I think I would have to put Carini on there just because I think that's my vote, just because it can go anywhere and do anything. And usually it goes pretty dark and weird.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love that about it too. And whenever you hear those opening chords, especially if it's like a set opener, it's on par to me with Punch You in the Eye or Buried Alive or something where you're like, okay, it might be something really special, or they're locked in, or they're in a good mood, or it feels real good when you hear those opening chords.
Well, that piques my curiosity. Is it too loud in a metal workshop? I was going to ask what music you listen to while you're forging metal, or is it irrelevant because you're focused on the work?
Well, I am very focused, but I do listen to music. I have, big noise canceling hearing protection that can hook up to Bluetooth. So that's when I do podcast, books on tape a lot. But if I can't really focus on the spoken word like that, then I'll listen to music. And that's usually when I catch up on the current tour or go back and re-listen to a lot on live Phish. One of the things about your podcast that's so great is it exposes the listeners to versions of songs or shows that they might not have stumbled across on their own. So I have a note going on my phone, and I'll always punch in a date in a song as y'all are discussing it. And so when I do listen to music in the shop, I go back and I have a nice database of stuff to check out. So
speaking of metalwork, this is kind of away from Phish, but do you get excited, judgmental, or how do you feel when you see movies or TV shows specifically that take place in a fantasy or medieval setting and people are forging swords and armor? How do you feel? Do you get judgmental? Do you get excited that people are showing what you do? How does it hit you?
Judgmental a lot for sure, because I'm so passionate about the craft and certainly how it's represented to the general public. I mean, that's a big part of, CMA is, teaching people the right way to do things, the safe way to do things, and, efficiency and all that kind of stuff. And it is very, very popular. So you see it a lot now in fantasy stuff, or feel like Game of Thrones or something. You can't have any sort of depiction of that kind of stuff without seeing a blacksmith in the background or whatever. But it's a double-edged sword, pun intended, because you do want people to get exposed to the craft and in some way or another, and that certainly does it. But it's often a very inaccurate depiction. The one I can think of off the top of my head is in The Mandalorian. There's a lot of forging in there, like the armor and stuff like that, and it's really funny because it's ridiculous. But I do know the blacksmith that made all the tools for that show. So it's pretty fun.
That's cool. Are there any shows or movies that you feel got it right?
No. Maybe like a PBS documentary about how to make a gunsmith or something like that, but not in modern days. They never really get it right because it's just about capturing someone's attention for the 10 seconds it's on the screen. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, any Hollywood directors, writers, or set directors listening now, we have a consultant on the line who can be hired for lots of money, who can tell you how to get it exactly right. So
Well,
reach
I
out.
just want to say one thing, and I don't say this to too many people, so here goes, because now it's on a podcast. But Batman versus Superman, you remember that movie?
Vaguely. I think I tried hard to forget it, actually.
I know it's pretty awful, but there's this, and even worse is a scene where Ben Affleck is doing, CrossFit or whatever, and he's swinging a sledgehammer at a tire. I made that sledgehammer.
Cool. Oh, cool.
So if you pause it at just the right moment, you can see my maker's mark on the side of that hammer there.
I didn't know I was talking to a celebrity. That's awesome. Bring it back to Phish a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
What are your thoughts overall about the Mohegan Sun Arena? I have a double-edged sword, again, pun intended, to throw it back at you about it, because I went to the shows in 2019 and I thought, oh man, this is the perfect 10,000 seat venue to see Phish. It feels big. It sounds big, but it feels small when you're there and the music is on. I remember there was a version of Wingsuit that just hit the spot perfectly. And then when I went to this show, or these two shows in 2024, I felt it to be a little overcrowded. I thought it was very hot. I feel like they kind of turned off the HVAC system. So you've been there probably more than I have, since you're a Connecticut native. Overall, what's your view of Mohegan Sun? Not the casino necessarily, but the venue.
Yeah. Well, that was my first and only time there, actually. Okay. So I have the similar feeling that you had your first time, it sounds like, where I was really attracted to the size of the venue before having gone in there. I thought, 10,000 people, this is going to feel really small and intimate, but still feel like an arena rock show, which I really like. I think by far my highest show numbers is Madison Square Garden. I sort of consider that my hometown venue. And so that's the size I'm used to. So when you slash that in half or so, it does feel nice and small. And so perhaps at the moment, I didn't feel bothered by the overcrowdedness or the heat. I also had really good seats. So I think, my initial knee-jerk reaction is I really liked the venue. I liked the size, and it felt really good. So from that perspective, I enjoyed it a lot.
And finally, what is the weirdest or strangest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
Yeah, considered that a lot, having, known it was going to come up here. And to be quite honest, I couldn't really think of anything worth citing. I'm a very detail-oriented person, and I notice a lot of things, but I tend to really live in the present. And so reflecting back on that kind of thing, I really was at a loss. But I was at Coventry, so I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that I did see. But yeah.
Coventry or Batman versus Superman? It's got
God.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor. If you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
When was this show played?
So let's take a look back at the summer of 2024. My personal experience was I saw 13 shows in the calendar year of 2024, but just 6 during this summer tour. It was these two at Mohegan Sun, and then I went to the Mondegreen Festival. And that kind of helped me reflect because 2024, I looked at it when I kind of scrolled through Phish.net and what the tour looked like. It was the year of the Phish destination event. Like
Right.
Mexico started the year, and then they went to the Sphere in April, Mondegreen at the end of the summer, and New Year's Run at the end of the year. There was also the band's appearance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, where the band played Evolve because then the album was new. They had just released it, plus the Fish in an Elevator sketch, which I think is better than their actual performance on the show. There was the NPR Tiny Desk set. Dick's also, I would count as a destination event. And
Yep.
then a 3-night benefit for the Divided Sky Foundation in Albany. So, all told, the way I looked at it, depending on anyone's budget, this is like a hotel heavy tour. Not a lot of camping and finding a place to crash at your friends because you're in the same place for like 3 or 4 days.
Right.
You know what I mean? There wasn't a lot of touring going on as
Yeah,
opposed
totally.
to get there and set up. I was going to say set up camp, but get there and find a place to stay.
Yeah, I agree. I only saw these two shows, and I think a couple during the holiday run at the end of the year. And perhaps is because of what you're mentioning. I wasn't able to carve out any significant time to travel or see some of these more destination location shows. Yeah.
And it seems to be a trend over the past couple of years that during the tour, a lot of fans are saying how the band is playing the best that they've ever played or the best since, plug in a year here. And what surprised me about 2024 is how many people reached out to me to record an episode from 2024 about a show
Right.
that had recently been played as the tours were still going on. So this is the 8th episode of Attendance Bias about a show from 2024, which includes a recap of Mondegreen, the festival. So
Right.
there's something about this year, 2024, as it was ongoing that struck a nerve with the fan base, or at least the portion of the fan base that listens to this podcast. For those of you listening at home that want to dive a little deeper into the year, the episodes include my friend Katie, better known as the Funky Witch with a PH. She was gushing about her time at the Sphere. Patty Gamble telling about her time at Van Andel Arena with Billy Strings. Jeffrey Rosenberg about his experience a few days after that at August 9th at Bethel Woods. And again, we did a few recaps from the Mondegreen Festival and New Year's and the Mexico as well. What I remember most is musically, they were able to kind of stick the landings of big jams and make really well-placed transitions as opposed to ripcords.
Right.
They were able to like communicate in a way that they were able to start the next song right on a dime as opposed to Trey just starting to play a riff while the rest of the band is floating out there somewhere in space. So to me, their playing sounded as fluid as ever, maybe as tight as ever, but they hit the changes, which to me makes a big deal.
Yeah, me too. I think you're right on with that for sure. And I think I really appreciated that about the tour too. And one thing I noticed that you just brought up is being able to land a jam and come back in and close out the song. I think I really like closure. So that kind of stuff resonates really well with me also.
And so these Mohegan Sun shows, there were two. They were played on July 23rd and 24th in what I described as the stuffy arena. Maybe if I had better seats, I'll allow that. Maybe it would have been a more pleasant atmosphere physically, I mean. But this time I stayed in an Airbnb with a small group of friends just about a 5-minute drive away from the casino. In 2019, I was on site in the casino, which was the greatest time because there was also simultaneously a Little Miss beauty pageant. So if you got into an elevator going up to your room, you might bump into these pageant moms with their like 6 or 7-year-old daughters who are dolled up to look like professional models. It was very odd, but very fun. And this time, as I mentioned before, this venue just felt a little more crowded, a little more hot. But again, that's my experience. I'm glad you had a better one. I was pretty high up night one, so maybe that just painted it in less than a perfect
Right.
setting. So let me ask you, you said this was your first time at the Mohegan Sun Arena. Who were you? Where were you in the summer of 2024 when these shows came around?
Yeah, I still am and have been for quite a while before 2024 living in Western Pennsylvania. So, I see shows a lot around here whenever they come up or whatever. And then I see a lot of the Madison Square Garden shows because that's a, tradition for me. And I'm always home to see family over the holidays. So it's actually kind of difficult for me to see a lot of summer shows if they're not nearby, because that's also our busy season at Center for Metal Arts. And so I don't know really what inspired my trip back east to go to these shows. I think perhaps I had a moment where I was able to sneak away for a couple days. Another thing about them was I went to see them with a good old show buddy of mine from back in like the late 90s and early 2000s that we don't get to see a lot of shows together. And so perhaps that with, being able to stay at a family or friend's house because it's in Connecticut, made it more affordable. I just sort of just finished a big workshop. I felt like celebrating and treating myself. And I think I was like, well, this is in the cards. I'm going to go for it, and made the drive back. So I feel happy I did, but I think that's sort of where I was at with that.
When you and I were going back and forth about what show or what jam you wanted to discuss, you zeroed in almost immediately on Most Events Aren't Planned, which ended set 1 of night 2 of this 2-night stand. Before we get to Most Events Aren't Planned specifically, what are your highlights or your best memories from these 2 nights?
The curtain, and then Mike's, and then because I felt like that was another moment where you got a little surprised, or they kind of did one of those for the fans sort of thing, because I always like the curtain width. And so when we didn't get the width, I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. Still really enjoy the curtain, of course. But when they brought it back in the Mike's Weekapog suite, I was like, this is a little treat for us. And I really appreciated that. So, when I think back on those shows, it's Most Events Aren't Planned, and that sort of, aspect of that. I think that was night 2 that really stick out for me as highlights for sure.
This version of Most Events Aren't Planned played to close set 1 of night 2 after Reba, which comes out of a big applause, and it's being played at a moderate tempo. Most Events Aren't Planned, a song that I think is always on the edge of busting out, and I feel like this version is the one I'm going to think about when I think the before and after. When songs are new and I say, yeah, I like it, I don't know if it's one of my favorites yet, and then they play one version of it, and I'm like, okay, I'm in. Now it's in my wallet of favorite Phish songs. This is the version of Most Events Aren't Planned. When I listen to this audience recording from it, it just sounds very chatty, and then all of a sudden it's not. Everyone it demands their attention.
Yeah, I agree. I think, for me, excuse me, Most Events Aren't Planned. After, witnessing this one or whatever, and then talking with you, or even before I reached out to you, this one had such a effect on me that I had started to do a little research, or, whenever a tour is happening and it becomes available on Live Phish, and I see that they play Most Events Aren't Planned, I always listen to it. I try to listen to every show on the tour, but sometimes you have to skip around a little bit or whatever. But I make it a point to never skip over most events aren't planned because of this particular one. And I feel like they never live up to what this one was like, and they always leave me a little disappointed. And I'd seen it, I think, one time after this or two times before this or whatever, and it was never on my radar until this version because of what you said. It was like from my perspective, they nailed like every change, and the timing was perfect. And I think what I mean by that is like they were just locked in. And I felt like they were sort of feeling that, which is why it generated so much of that energy and momentum that I just remember standing there, like watching the show, a little bit from above, and the music just was like washing over me. And it just was like all consuming, I guess is the way to describe it. But I just knew we were witnessing something truly special for sure.
Well, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. Where were your seats for this show?
I think I was on Mike's side, section of like a lower second section, I feel like. But when where the hallway goes into the concierge or whatever, I was right at the rail above one of those hallways, so there was nobody in front of me, and I just had this really incredible view. I love Mike. I think, he's my favorite band member, so I love to be on Mike's side. It was a little elevated, but it was really clear, and it wasn't totally on the side. It was more of like a 3/4 sort of view, so I got the lights and everything, and it just was perfect, man. It was just unbelievable.
That's great. I'm seeing it through your eyes right now. As the song starts, like I said, it's kind of a mid-tempo. I bet a lot of people went to go to the bathroom or to get a drink, I would guess, because when you look at your watch, it's about the end of the set, but not quite. So, and this is not, let's be honest, a fan favorite song. If you ask 100 fans to name their top 10, I bet most events aren't planned wouldn't come up at all.
Totally.
Is my guess. Yeah. But about 2 minutes in, this is a Page song, right? He adds some attitude, some vocal attitude in his inflection at about 2 minutes. And Trey is just casually adding these awesome guitar licks to complement the rhythm. I didn't hear it at the time, but listening back, it's something I could really appreciate.
Yeah.
What it feel like to be free? Out of space and time, and the boundaries of my mind.
Me too. I think, Trey in this song was really patient and really complimentary of the other bandmates. And that's one of, his best versions in my opinion. And I just think, everything he did just seemed to complement Page. And I obviously feel the same way you do is Page really, stepped forward and brought a lot of flavor to this particular version. And I feel like as listening back several times as I did, he is really responsible, I think, for taking this, little jam to the energetic peaks that it had. And as I listened back, I could just, focus on him. And I feel like Trey was almost like taking his lead, so to speak. So I'm really appreciative of his playing.
I agree. This is Page's song, but Trey, it's like 1 and 1A. while Fishman and Mike keep the tempo going. I think in all my notes, I don't think I mention either member of the rhythm section, but that's okay because they have their times to shine a billion other places. And the first paragraph of my notes is that the tempo is so steady. The tempo is so steady. And then as soon as I finished writing it, as I'm listening, at about 3.5 minutes, the tempo completely shifts. And Page absolutely kills it on what I think is the clavinet. I don't have a great keyboard vocabulary. And then he switches over to the piano and the crowd goes nuts.
Out of space and time, and the boundaries of my mind.
This is the time when you and I were just discussing before, where people who are maybe chatting or standing up and asking the row if they can get by, this is when everyone kind of freezes. You could hear it in the audience. This is a rare jam that benefits from Trey just repeating a phrase over and over and not necessarily innovating or leading the way.
I agree. Those tempo shifts for me were huge in this version, and they were nailed perfectly. And I agree that timing, that was about the time the hair on the back of my neck started to stand up as well and get goosebumps,
Yeah, I agree. Because when you mentioned this and I said, oh, most events aren't planned, this guy must have a really good story to tell, as opposed in my head to the actual performance of the song. And I had to eat my thoughts. I had to eat my words because this is really hair raising, to your point. And then at 5.5 minutes, Trey's a true, not just a pianist, but a true keyboard player because he's still playing the clav with one hand, but then he switches to piano heaven. Leading to this enormous build where the crowd gets riled up. And then by 7 minutes, we're on a completely new level, where the band finds themselves at the coda, but they're not ready to end the song yet.
Yeah, like I started in my notes here, I have at 6:20. I felt like there's this really beautiful interplay between Page and Trey, and it was like evidence that I felt like they were really listening to one another. They Trey might have been facing Page, I can't remember, but I really enjoyed it, and it was bringing to this build up, and I think that's part like one of my favorite things about this song and this particular version is at the end there's that repeating like power chord thing that Trey does, and then throws some like solo licks in between. But if you listen carefully, I believe Page is the one that really starts that, and then it does a few like revelations, and then I think Trey sort of like goes, "Oh, that's fucking good. Let me get involved with that."
Yeah.
And then it really reminds me, and I think this is like honestly my favorite part is it really reminds me of like mid 90s like Split Open and Melt jams at the end, where it always goes back to the dun, 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 and
Yep.
over and over again. And this really had that feel. And I remember thinking like, this is what I wish modern Split Open and Melt jams were like. And so I just really resonated with me.
Yeah, you and me both. I know I could follow you completely. In that version, in the Split Open and Melt, it's usually Fishman that sends
Right.
the note out, the notice that like, hey, let's get back to the recognizable part of the song.
Yeah.
Here, it's Page. And every timestamp I put up, the next one is at 8 minutes and 30 seconds, that Trey is just wailing on lead guitar. And Fishman and Mike, this is the first time that I mention them, and my notes end after this sentence, I think, is keeping the rhythm steady while Trey and Page are the ones flashing around, showing off, and the crowd, all in caps, is going nuts. You mentioned Split Open and Melt. My final note is this energy isn't far off from a prime 1994 Down with Disease.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you there too. And I think that crowd is going nuts. Like one of the best things to happen, in my opinion, at a Phish show is when the crowd recognizes that the band is, going above and beyond, or they're locked in, or they found something that's really special improvisationally. And then you have those spontaneous crowd roars. And I think this has two of them, but it has one major crowd roar as it is at 8:30 or something like that. And it is just like goosebump central for sure.
Do you remember anything about Set Break or how you felt after this track ended?
Yeah, my poor buddy, man. He makes it a point, and it's just the nicest thing in the world. But like, he goes out right before it gets crowded, and he gets everybody, a cookie sandwich with ice cream in the middle.
I'm
And
coming to a show with you guys next time.
we always appreciate it, but this one time I was, as like the music and the lights were washing over me, and the spontaneous crowd roar and the goosebumps, and then I look over at my buddy and he wasn't there, and my heart just broke for him. But at Set Break I was just like, what just happened? Like, because I that song wasn't even really on my radar, so I was like, this is just incredible. I was just in awe. It was really just floating. You know what I mean?
Well, Patrick, thank you for coming on and taking the time today to tell us about metal industrial arts, and maybe more importantly, I don't know, time will tell, most events aren't planned from July 24th, 2024 at Mohegan Sun. Something that I think most people, if they were scrolling through episodes of this podcast, might not stop and say, oh, I got to listen to that one. Right. But you got to listen to this one.
Yeah. And I hope it, I was like, if I can do one thing in this life, it's bring awareness to this. Most events aren't planned. So I hope I did that and everybody goes back and listens to it.
And that's it for today's episode with Pat Quinn. We got nearly everything right. Just a few tidbits to add on to today's conversation.
Attendance bias fact check.
First, Connecticut looms large in my show-going memory, but the numbers don't play out the way that I really thought. I looked up how many shows I've seen in each state, and while New York is first by a huge gap, I've seen more shows in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, California, and Colorado before Connecticut appears on my list. So thank goodness for the Helping Friendly app to keep my facts straight. Trey's story when he told Bob Weir about one of his first impactful Grateful Dead shows in Connecticut was told in an interview, more like a roundtable discussion for the Connecticut Forum. The conversation was in 2004. Trey tells Bob Weir that he was, quote, in Taft in Watertown, Connecticut, into heavy metal when he saw the Dead at the Hartford Civic Center for the first time ever in 1983. He described seeing the show and the connection between the band and the fans as, quote, like getting hit in the head with a baseball bat. And one more thing, just in case there's anybody out there who hasn't heard the SPAC Tweezer Reprise Fest, whatever you want to call it, the date of the show is July 27th, 2025, and I've recorded an entire episode about it with my friends Casey and Jen, recently aired, that you should check out as well. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Pat Quinn for joining me today, Phish.net for their help with the fact check, the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You could do this by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app, and you could visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance-bias and donating anything you can. Every penny helps keep the lights on here at production. Finally, thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.